We go to school in the heart of Silicon Valley, so it's safe to assume that the internet is an integral part of our daily lives. In fact, you're watching this speech on YouTube right now. I'm here to inform you about the concept of net neutrality, which has been the backbone of the internet since it was created. We'll first discuss what exactly net neutrality is, the history of it, and the current issues surrounding it. So first, on how net neutrality works, you have to talk about the internet itself. So what is the internet? In basic terms, it's basically just a bunch of computers sending data to each other at set speeds. And you pay for this data through internet service providers like Comcast or Verizon, and you pay for whatever speed you want. How this factors into net neutrality is that, a quote from Cherlin Lau of Engadget is that net neutrality is the idea that, as its name implies, the internet and the companies that provide it should be neutral. Its speed or reliability should not be affected because of what you're downloading or whether your service provider likes it. So in layman's terms, this is like if you're watching a YouTube video, it shouldn't be any slower than if you're watching a Netflix video. So that's the basic concept of net neutrality. So we can move on to the history of net neutrality and the internet itself. So, in its infancy, the internet was only accessible through dial-up. And there were very few people using the internet in general, and there were very few uses for the internet in general. Nowadays, this is way different, since pretty much everyone uses the internet, and now there are many internet service providers like AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon. So this inspires a lot more competition between internet service providers for faster speeds. This also means that there's much more use of the internet by much more people, which means a heavier load on bandwidth and internet infrastructures on the internet service providers. Over time, this load has gotten so large that internet service providers have chosen to take precautions to help themselves. So what they have done is, they've done two things. One, they've slowed down internet services for people. For example, Comcast would slow down Netflix, or AT&T would slow down FaceTime. And another one is that they would charge internet services more money to keep their same speed. So from the article, Why Title II is Not the Answer for Internet Freedom, the government actually noticed this, and they instated the Open Internet Order, which meant, quote, the 2015 Open Internet Order had classified the ISPs as common carriers providing a telecommunications service under Title II of the Communications Act of 1934. This classification gave the FCC the authority to impose various rules on ISPs, including those relating to net neutrality. So after this act, ISPs were put under Title II, which meant they were regulated similarly to those of public services, just like water and electricity. So they were heavily regulated by the government, which meant that they couldn't throttle or charge extra for services that were before equal. So now that we know about that, we can move on to the current issues regarding net neutrality. So right now, the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, is trying to switch the internet from Title II to Title I. And for those of you who don't know, the FCC, according to the FCC.gov, the FCC regulates interstate and international communications by radio, television, wire, satellite, and cable in all 50 states. So obviously the internet falls under those purviews, and thus the FCC regulates the internet in America. So what the FCC right now is trying to do is go from Title II internet to Title I internet. What this means is much less regulation and much less transparency on the part of the internet service providers. This means that they can go back to throttling, they can go back to charging more for internet, and in general, you get to know less about what's going on with your internet. This effectively reverses the Open Internet Order that I previously talked about, and a lot of people like and dislike this. There's many pros and cons, and according to Crystal Ains of Utana, these are the pros and cons of having net neutrality versus not having net neutrality. One, a pro is that everyone gets equal speeds to everything. Another pro is that smaller companies don't have to pay large premiums for the same internet benefits that large companies have. And a con is that there are many services on the internet that are free or legal that the ISPs don't gain any benefit for. Another con is that many people use internet bandwidth in a much larger context than most other people, yet they still pay the same prices that normal people use. And less regulation or more net neutrality means that more illegal services are able to keep afloat and keep their business going, as opposed to more legitimate businesses. So after hearing the pros and cons and discussing exactly how net neutrality works, discussing the history and discussing the current state of the issue, I hope that you can now make a more informed decision regarding net neutrality policy in the future.